So, good evening. Good evening, how are you? It's good to have you here tonight. We are beginning because our live stream has already started, so can you hear me? Mic test. Okay, Shelli, I would just suggest do this, okay? So, a couple of things. First, welcome to Forum. We'll introduce Shelli in just a minute, Senator Yoder in just a moment. But a couple of things. This is Forum. This is one of our ongoing adult education experiences here at St. Mark's, and we've had already one this month. We're doing a second one this month. And this is our first live in-person event in quite a while. We are also live streaming this. So I want to say that Shelli's going to be talking to us in any way that you want to talk to us, and at some point you can open it up for questions. If you want to ask a question out loud, that's perfectly fine. I would ask you to let me bring a microphone to you so that people at home can hear you do this. So there are three kind of audiences tonight. There's one that's here, there's one that's home, and there's one that will watch the recording of this at whatever time they choose to stream it. So if you're going to say something, let's let you have the mic, and it's absolutely okay. There's another mic that I'll have up there, and I'll just come back to you, or Mary Beth will bring it to you and just speak right into it. Secondly, if you prefer not to do that, there are you can just run back there, get a note card and write something on the note card and pass it up to me, and I'll make sure that we get the questions asked. Okay? All good? Okay. Well, Senator, we are so happy to have you here tonight. I want to say that one of my favorite sounding towns in Indiana is Shipshewana, right? This is your hometown, right? And we're glad that you're here. I know that you have a degree in interpersonal, or you studied interpersonal communication at IU, Purdue University, Fort Wayne, and I hope you speak to this tonight, you got a Master of Divinity degree from Vanderbilt Divinity School, which is a very fine institution. And I'll let you talk about some of the things you are passionate about, but we are really honored that you're coming to share with us at St. Mark's tonight. We hope you feel quite at home and quite free to say whatever you need to say, knowing it's going out all over the internet, okay? Come welcome. We're glad to have you here. There you go.
Thank you so much. And it is a blessing to be here. And it's a little pleasure that I took for granted and really missed over the last couple of years. As I was pulling up to the church to walk in, I was thinking, my goodness, how excited I am just to be with people, and not virtual, but in person. But those who are listening virtually, I am also grateful that the experience over the last 2 years has inspired us to have more accessible meetings, that people can come face to face or be part of a community virtually. And it has challenged us all to maybe stretch ourselves outside of our comfort zone and try technology and hopefully befriend it in such a way and feel more comfortable with it so we can find different ways of being community together. I am Shelli Yoder, and it is an honor to serve you in the State Senate. This was my second year, and the last 2 years certainly have been interesting, serving during a global pandemic and being new to the process, as well as having different kinds of guidelines that we've been asked to follow. This year, certainly we started the year differently than last year. A few of us wore masks, many of us did not, and the first part of the session, well, for the first probably 10 weeks, definitely the mask wearing was a priority, but as the numbers went down and as we were getting better news the last couple of weeks, I was able to take that mask off, and it was so nice. Many of my colleagues were not wearing masks, and so it was good to see their full face, but it was just nice to see smiles and to be able to smile back, and for them to know, in fact, that we could have some interpersonal communication. It was my degree, and how important that facial expression is in building relationships. So I was thankful for that as well. Speaking of one other experience of the COVID experience, how much it has changed the way we do interact with each other. Last Sunday, I had the honor of participating, or at least worshiping with, Second Baptist Church and their 150-year celebration in Bloomington. And after that celebration, somebody came up to me and said, "I really miss you in the neighborhood." And I'm thinking, which neighborhood? Like, what community do I know you? Masked? I finally just said, "Where were we neighbors?" And they said, Park Ridge East. And so she took off her mask. She said, "I've let my hair grow long, and I could only see this." And I said, of course. But people have changed their looks. 2 years does a number on people, especially during a global pandemic, and that mask does not help. So hopefully we will be reintroducing ourselves to each other. But Tom, I certainly appreciate seeing you. And neighbors maybe we're not neighbors now, but neighbors from yesteryear. I do belong to First United Church, and as Jimmy said, I have a master's degree, a Master's of Divinity degree from Vanderbilt, and really entertained the idea of how did I want to use this degree the entire time I was at Vanderbilt. And I went through the student in care process and did an internship with the United Church of Christ and felt at home. I grew up Mennonite, and that community was a Congregationalist church, and the UCC felt very familiar with the congregational polity, and found my home there. And so when we moved back to Indiana and moved here to Bloomington, it was just a nice feeling to be at home once again at First United. But I know that there are so many different congregations that we find community together and interact, whether it's certain celebrations or community events, that the building itself doesn't matter so much as just being able to feel like this is home. And so I do worship there as my home church, but I have so many different communities that I enjoy celebrating and participating in different services and activities throughout our community, and how grateful I am for that. So the last 2 years have been interesting, and my priorities while serving you in the Senate have revolved around the needs that all Hoosiers have, that typically tend to be those whose voices are diminished or minimized, and that being whether it's food insecurity or housing accessibility, access to health care, child care concerns and issues. I serve on many different committees, primarily because I am a member of the minority party, and it's not just a minority, it's a super minority. So there are 11 of us, and we serve on many different committees. So I'm the ranking minority member on environment, and I serve on education, health and provider services, utilities, commerce and technology, and ethics. And also am in leadership with our caucus, and serve as the assistant caucus chair for the Democratic Party in the Senate. And in those roles over the last 2 years, I've learned, number one, it's like church. As soon as you get a new member, they're like, all the committees you can be a part of. You want to go here? We're putting you to work. That's exactly what it's like being a member of the minority party at the General Assembly. You get put on a lot of different committees and commissions, and your days stay very busy. And I am grateful for the work, and I have enjoyed the work immensely and have been challenged by the work. And some of the things I have worked on, number one, just learning how the process works. We take those classes and we learn about it sort of in the abstract of how a bill becomes a law, but actually seeing how the process actually works. And I am in the Senate, and it is confusing to me still. And here's why. There are ways that it moves through that I, I'm surprised that there isn't a sense of urgency that I see, and I'm reminded this process takes a long time, is what I'm told. But the thing is, some of these actually don't take a long time. We can hear a bill, and it can pass through the Senate and go to the House, and if it passes through the Senate, is headed to the governor's desk immediately and can be enacted pretty quickly. And so our opportunities to change it or to make sure it's as harmless as possible aren't very many. I mean, it can go very, very quickly. And then there are those bills that move along very, very slowly and take a lot more time. So you have bills that can move at wicked speed and those that seem to take a good long time to get to the finish line, and along the way you can lose track that these bills are still alive and you can still make a difference in how they're going to impact your life, Hoosiers' lives. And you have probably been very aware of several of those this year, and I'm hoping you want to ask about those or have questions about the process. But some of the ones that have been the most contentious this year have come out of the Education Committee. So I was able to see these from beginning until end and really work to defeat them from the very start. And I'm so proud of the work that we were able to do this session to defeat those bills, every single one of them, every single line of these very divisive and problematic bills, to come at the other end and see that we were able to defeat all of those. It really took the entire state of Indiana, every community coming together, not just teachers, not just parents, but so many different stakeholders and community leaders, from faith communities to business leaders, to legislators, to teachers, to hospital administrators, seeing how some of the language of the bills that maybe have nothing to do with health on its face, but really the underlying concerns in some way do impact health. And so they were concerned, even if they were in education or had to do with education matters, that people in Indiana said, that's not the direction we want to go for our state. And you made your voices heard, and it's inspiring to see the impact we can have when so many people are engaged and engaged relentlessly. So we can talk about education. I want to hear from you as well. It's interesting in environment. I serve on utilities, and I'm really thankful that I serve on utilities as well, because many bills that you would think, why would they be in utilities and not in environment? Because there's a lot of overlap. I'm thankful that I'm in both, because many bills don't get heard in environmental affairs. Sadly, we met, I think, 3 times this entire session. And when you're thinking about the global crisis, the climate crisis that is impacting us globally, and that we only met 3 times, the House met once, it's outrageous, really. It's outrageous. So the bills that we were hearing in utilities did directly impact environment, but they were put in utilities. And some of these bills went through and didn't have much pushback. And some of them we passed through small modular reactors, small nuclear facilities that there can be siting for those in Indiana, and that has been signed into law. And I recognize that there is a concern about renewables being reliable, but I would push back and say that that is not what science is showing us. That if we put investment into storage, which we did pass something exciting this session for storage, and invested in renewables, we could find a way forward. And it doesn't have to be something that has so many question marks like nuclear energy. You know, that's has controversy, because I know, regardless if you're a Republican or a Democrat, I mean, that is kind of a hot button issue. And for Indiana, we did pass some small modular reactors for Indiana without much discussion. I serve on the 21st Energy Task Force, which meets when we're not in session, and we never once discussed this. All last session, I mean, all last interim. And then we come into session and we, without much debate, without much processing what this might look like for Indiana, what is this going to cost, it went very quickly. So there's a bill that one of those bills that I think we should probably push the brakes on this just a little bit and ask a few more questions, spend a little bit more time here, because nuclear waste stays around for thousands of years, and even if I'm being told it's not that much, it's still nuclear waste, and we need to be having a conversation about what that's going to look like for Indiana. But that is now, that's been signed into law. So with a pause, I will take a break and want to take questions from the Facebook Live, maybe that is, or Zoom, I'm not sure.
It's live stream. Let me go ahead and ask one, and then I want to just say, if any of you want to ask a question, just let me know. The question I want to ask you first is, how do you see Senator and faith communities contributing to this political and legislative process, and how are those ways useful, and how are those ways not useful? So that maybe could inform us in our any actions that people here wanted to take.
I want to hear from you. I want to hear where your congregation stands on pieces of legislation. And I know that's probably, there aren't many that maybe the congregation as a whole wants to get involved in, but it happens pretty quickly. Once the bills are filed, you have to move through, it's about, could be as, many as 1,000 bills to see sort of what the language is, and then pay attention to both the Senate and the House at what's being heard, because even if it's filed doesn't mean it's going to be heard. And then let me hear from you. I think that's what was so powerful for House Bill 1134 and Senate Bill 267, was I heard from faith communities. Faith communities testified in committee. And in our state house, that actually makes a difference when we hear from faith communities on certain bills, that you're going to come and take time out of your day to testify in a committee for or against a bill. That means something. It means something to me, and it means something to me especially when you're from my district. So you have a great deal of power, whether it's by pen or by voice. You can reach out and let us know how you feel about certain pieces of legislation. If you can send a personal email, that's always best. I mean, by personal, I mean the ones that generate an email that gets sent. What we've learned this session, so many emails were generated that they weren't delivered to us, because apparently they have put a limit on those emails getting sent out to legislators. So if possible, just to be on the safe side, send a quick little message. It does not have to be long. It can be as short as, please oppose this, please support, and then the bill number. And if you want to give me a reason why, give me a reason why. But I sort of tally all of these. If things move quickly, and if I need to reach out, texting to my legislative assistant, like, give me some numbers on where are people with this bill. Have I heard from people? I don't hear from a lot of people, but when I do, it makes a difference. So let me hear from you. Okay, so you asked me what isn't helpful. It's all helpful. I mean, we pray before every session. And if you are interested in coming and offering that prayer, let me know. I stand in awe and concern about some of the prayers that are spoken, considering that we are there to serve all of Indiana. And I can appreciate the pause and reverence of what we're doing. But I also know that my Anabaptist people came here in search of separation of church and state, and so I wrestle with that. And it is not because I am not a person of faith. It is oftentimes an awkward moment before we do the people's work. And so that would be my answer to that question, the other half of that question.
So anybody else want to ask a question? I'll also say for those who are home, if you want to put something in the chat, I am monitoring that.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thank you for coming. It's really wonderful to have an opportunity to speak with you like this. You mentioned at the very beginning of your remarks about what's happened this session, that the education bills as a whole group didn't go through, and yet with a supermajority, what did they get wrong in bringing all of that up and having it all go down in defeat? There seems like something is wrong there.
Yes, the drive behind filing those bills, what's misguided there is if the intent is truly to create safe space in the classroom, then we should be speaking to how are we going to support, train, and encourage dialogue in the classroom, and then bridge this gap to home. These are intimidating conversations, and we are at a crossroads where we must be having them. And for centuries, and maybe more like decades, centuries this is a problem, but decades in the classroom, we have not paid attention to our Black students, our brown students, who have felt uncomfortable, and we've done nothing. We have not responded with such intensity. We've just, sat on our hands. But since the George Floyd murder, how different white people, many white people have said, oh, we need to sit down and we're failing and we're not listening and we need to do a better job of lifting up Black voices, Black experiences, Black history. And that has been uncomfortable in the classroom. And I think that has really been the impetus of many of these bills, is fear. Fear of losing power, fear of losing control, and under this front of we want to make sure that no one is made to feel guilty or uncomfortable in the classroom, when really I think it was just white children. That's what we want to make sure. And I think it was incredible that we could have this conversation, and it required, I've said this word before, a relentless questioning of what is the motivation behind this? What inspired you filing this? Why did you file it? What is this about? And then being able to hear and be able to hold accountable those that have filed this legislation. Really, what is moving them behind some of these bills? And then it was different, for the Senate bill that we heard. I mean, not every bill is going to get national attention, but that one got national attention because, what was said that, fascism and Nazism should be treated the same as democracy, and a teacher should not espouse opinions about fascism and Nazism, and that, I think, sort of woke people up. Like, okay, people maybe who weren't hearing it before could hear that, but so you pick up a little bit more, and then so that bill dies, and then Senate Bill 1134, that still had some legs and some momentum behind it, and we were fully anticipating that bill being, taken across the finish line. And so that was it was, these small little wins. On the deadline, that bill had to be heard or it was dead. To hear, pass, we're not going to, take a vote on this bill. It was just really inspiring. I mean, you have to follow these bills until the very end, until we're out of session, because these bills can be placed into other bills. But for the most part, these little victories are wins, which makes me come back to Senate bill or House, well, now vetoed bill 1041, which is a bill that forbids trans girls from participating in sports in K through 12 grades. And as much as we fought it, it did make it to the governor's desk, and this week he vetoed that bill. But now there's rumors that when we're called back into session for technical changes, this will be brought up, and we will, that vote will start on the House side to override that veto, and then it will come to the Senate side. But this is what we're hearing. And so what you can do now is continue to reach out and say, please don't waste our taxpayers' money on, this has already been vetoed, and we need to pay attention to what the governor said and move on. And so we do need your help still on that bill, because I have a feeling it will come back. We have, in 2 years, done a couple of veto overrides. We defeated one, though, this year. It was exciting. But it is, as I said, it is an honor to serve you in the Senate, and it's a different experience, because I try to be very cognizant of my language and choices, but I go, and it is, you work hard to educate, defeat, and improve on a daily basis. I mean, it is very, to be so few in number, just to hold each other accountable for what's happening there. I think it's a different, unique skill set that I have enjoyed, actually more than I thought I would, but it's been incredibly fulfilling work every day.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but do you think just the closeness of 1134-267 passing will discourage people from going into teaching?
We certainly haven't cultivated an environment where those who are called to the vocation of teaching want to follow through with that call, and that is a sad day. It's likely that's probably the case. I mean, you can see from the reaction and from the letters and emails that I have received, that those in the profession, those teachers, are feeling discouraged and disheartened and not trusted, mistrusted. I can't think of, it is a profession that, it is a vocation, it is a calling. And my hope is to get up every day and go to that State House and work hard to shift the mindset with the General Assembly, do all I can, I mean, but to offer hope and inspiration and healing to this profession in every way that we can. Like I said, with 1134, if what we need is, if students are feeling that it's an unwelcomed environment in the classroom, well, what do we need to do in the classroom to help teachers feel that they have what they need? And I think they do. They get great training in these teacher programs. However, we are also creating all of these pathways to teaching that aren't necessarily, this year, through a certification program. And so we are putting teachers, at the same time that we're listening, spending hours hearing these bills, undermining the profession of teaching, we're passing bills, law, putting into law these, you don't need a certification to teach, and you can go into the classroom and be an adjunct teacher forever. I mean, you can find other avenues to teaching. At this point, I think we're up to 14 different avenues to teaching to address the teacher shortage without ever really addressing that we don't pay them well and we don't respect the profession. I mean, if we could just spend some time there, I think that would attract a lot of very excited and enthusiastic teachers to enter the profession and stay with the profession. So even though we didn't pass them, I have a feeling it probably discouraged some from making that choice.
So Shelli Janice Arvison says, hi Shelli, how do you find time to be our senator, teach, and be a mom?
Well, that's a good question. I'm very thankful. I made a decision to teach in the fall, and I take unpaid leave in the spring. And so the Indiana legislature is a part-time legislature, and we are in session just in the spring. The responsibilities of being a state senator are year-round, so even if we're not in session and I'm not going to Indianapolis every day, there are certainly, like this, education, just meeting with constituents, hearing constituents' concerns, then preparing for next year. I am, as I mentioned, on many different committees, and we meet during the interim. So that takes place. And I am very fortunate that I have an awesome spouse and partner who is incredibly supportive. And we make it work. We find balance. And it's not a destination. It's kind of every day. What's working? How do we need to adjust? It's structured flexibility in our house, and some things don't get done. I mean, we find ways of loving our children, supporting them, and making sure that they are okay through all of this. Have lots of conversations about the process and physically being there. And I'm just grateful that I can work part-time, both in the legislature and teaching part-time, but be a full-time mom.
So this one is kind of a question I've got. It's kind of personal, but it's about your whole professional life. We live in a really contentious society right now. And it does seem that there are some people who are in public service who this wears down. I'm just wondering, how is it that you and others who are in this work maintain focus on what it was that led you to want to do this and not to get discouraged by the weight of the criticism, and some of it is pretty ridiculous stuff, but it's pretty intense right now. Just wondering how people in your field that you know, your colleagues, and you manage that.
Well, it can be just so ugly. So I will just say that. And I recognize that what works for me may not work for somebody else. I had to fill out an application for some summer training, a leadership institute for legislators, and the question was, what personal quality, one quality do you have that makes you a good legislator and gives you leadership qualities, and give us an example how. So I think my answer is actually why. So here, I think I'm an empathetic person. And my example was, it was my second week. I had a second reading amendment. I know nothing about anything at the State House at this point. It is my second week of being a state senator. And we were hearing a bill in the Health Committee on expanding telehealth services. And I wanted to make sure that it reached Medicaid recipients, which it did, but I didn't quite understand the language, so I had a second reading amendment to make sure it was going to cover Medicaid recipients as well in Indiana. And so I approached the author of this bill for a second reading amendment, and he pretty much told me in front of everybody that I was uneducated and clueless. You know, you're like, oh. The thing is, I am. I was, and I could just say, yeah, I didn't let it get me down. I mean, yes, I had to take a pause and take a breath because it's incredibly embarrassing. But I could also see it from his point of view. He was working really hard to get something across the finish line, and I am new. And I talked to him, and that exchange could have really warped my future relationship with him. But I just sort of put myself in his shoes and thought, you know what, he's right, I am, both of those things. And I'm not going to let this deter me. So I kept working at it, and he and I really, I mean, he is somebody I very much respect. He's a Republican, and I've enjoyed working with him. We've worked together this year on several things. And as a matter of fact, this is what's so funny. I had a bill, and it didn't get a hearing, but he is the one who found a home for it in another bill that passed as a second reading amendment. So I love that little story. But I think what keeps me going is just empathy and a sense of humor about it. And honestly, at the end of the day, I do get to come home to my family, my children, and I'm going to work my tail off to love them well, and that is really important to me, and they fuel me for the next day.
Thank you. Others? Yep, let's go over this side. Start with Susie.
I would like to be better informed on what's going on in the legislature. I've lived here less than a year, and there's a local television program on Fridays that's pretty good. You get little snippets on the other channel and little snippets in the newspaper, but I'd like to be more informed than that. Possibly you have a newsletter, possibly there are good websites.
Well, where are you from originally, and how has the transition been? Have we been a welcoming community for you? That's where I want to
I know Bloomington. It's been a while, though, since I've lived here, and I thought it might get a little bit of laugh if I told you I came here from Florida.
Oh.
I mean, politics is always in the news in Florida. It's so outrageous. But here I am.
And we're so glad you're here. And wise woman that you are to come back here. How can you, I would first ask, I mean, I've had a conversation with Legine about this as well. what issues are important to you, and then get involved with that organization and sign up for their newsletters, because so many organizations, whether it's public education or the environment or health, they have, I mean, I know lobbying gets a bad rap, but there are good ones out there doing important work, and they will keep you informed on issues that are important to you, on bills that have been filed, because like I said, there can be over 1,000 bills, and how can you possibly become an expert on all of these? But if there are issues that are important to you, you can sign up for their pieces of communication, their legislative updates. I know the chamber here puts out one. Now, maybe those issues don't, you know, float your boat, so to speak, or inspire you, but at least they give a good sort of an overview of some of the ones that are being considered every year. So you could sign up for that notification. If you're active in a party, you could ask for feedback from the party to find out what are we following, what concerns do we have. But you can also sign up for mine as well. But that's what I would encourage you to do. Decide what are the issues that are important to you, and then you can ask me and I can tell you which ones to get involved in, maybe after this, and I can direct you in some ways. But that would be time well spent, because these individuals are there, they're in it, and they'll help inform you on really what to follow and where to spend your time and what you need to do to either support something or oppose it.
Thank you. I wrote 12 letters last October, and I got one response, and it was from you.
Oh.
So
that's good.
That's something good to share.
That's good.
Thank you. This is kind of a question about county versus state, and I don't want to invent a problem that doesn't exist here yet. But I think most of us are really proud about this county, how it takes care of homeless people, provides services, all kinds of assistance. Excuse me. But the pattern across the country is, at a county level, when one county starts having a lot of compassion and provides a lot of services, people move from adjoining counties that are homeless or in need of extra services to take advantage of the county that offers the most. So I guess what I'm asking is, as I expect that our county will continue down that path, do we perceive that as becoming a problem, and are resources better equipped to deal with that at county levels or state levels? Where at the state level, there wouldn't be a motivation to move your family 4 counties over to get the services that you can't get at the county you happen to live in.
I think there are a couple of things going on, especially when you are caring and responding to issues of the unhoused, homelessness, and housing insecurity. Those are several different concerns and complications coming together. I would say for the most part, individuals want to stay where their families or where their community is. And imagine what it must take and where you must be in order to have to leave that and go someplace where you can find respite, find care, find food, find a place to sleep, find community. I keep saying this word, it's very important to me. I would say that I don't know, I don't want the state responding. It makes me, I think that when the state tries to force some statewide policies, it does impede a local community's ability to respond in a way that matches their values. And the state House, I mean, our General Assembly, doesn't have a good track record. I mean, we spend so much time addressing Marion County issues, Indianapolis issues, and they have a duly elected city county council. But the amount of time that we spend addressing their issues is pretty ridiculous, actually. And so, having come from out of county government, serving on the county council, having that experience and going and serving in the state senate has been very helpful for me, because I had a lot of relationships there, and I can use that to better legislation, as well as know where and who to talk to here and how it's going to impact us locally. But I think there are things we can do to help communities better respond to their residents. I really think that people want to stay where their homes are, or where they have a support system, versus having to go somewhere else, because that's what is available. But I don't want us as a community to shy away from that. I mean, we definitely are stretched thin. And the email I received from Forrest Gilmore today, I don't know if you got that as well, seeing what Beacon, or used to be Shalom, that they're pulling back on some of their not being able to provide services through the weekend. I mean, that is a problem. And as a community, as a faith community, we're going to have that conversation on what do we need to do? How do we respond? One of the most concerning things was sort of the violence, or more violent behavior. I'm not even sure what to read into that, but I think the best people to respond is are our neighbors, and how are we going to care for our neighbors, whether they came a year ago or they came last week. What can we do that is sustainable, responsive, caring, compassionate, and helps them get back on their feet and possibly able to return to their support system? So that's where I don't even know if this answers your question. I just think.
Yeah, I've just seen data that, and I can actually forward some of this if you're interested, but across the country, it appears that if a particular county offers better resources, maybe 10% better, 15% better, that you're exactly right. People don't want to leave their homes. But a few counties are particularly compassionate, and they offer services that are 40 or 50% better. And in fact, people get up and move. And of course, it's kind of no good deed goes unpunished, because then those same towns and counties struggle with how do you maintain providing that with maybe another 50% clients or more, because of that chicken and the egg sort of thing. And it's been suggested that pushing back to the state and making more resources available directly through state mechanisms rather than local mechanisms actually help, like you say, people want to stay in their home counties, and it makes sure that aid gets to them instead of the well-known counties getting the big grants and getting the attention from the state. So it seems like a more equitable solution and better help if it can be directed through the state level. That's my only thought.
Thank you.
Who else? He's right here.
All right. Hey, it's great to see you.
Hello.
Curious about bipartisanship and the prospects there. Obviously in the superminority, and you talked about building a good relationship with folks across the aisle. But I'm curious about the culture. Are there some that are there that are just completely closed-minded, that you can't win with, and then there's a portion of them that are? And kind of thinking about it, comparing it to the federal level, is it different at the state level, where it seems like a lot of folks just I'm going to jump on Trump's coattails and win, and whatever he says I'm going to do at the federal level? Do you see more willingness to discuss the issues and have a true meaningful dialogue at the state level than what we kind of see and hear play out at the federal level?
I would say that actually we pass far more bipartisan bills, and the really frustrating, ugly bills are the ones we spend so much time talking about and trying to defeat, really. But we were able to pass some good legislation this year. I mean, it doesn't go as far as what I would like, but we were able to expand Medicaid services for pregnant women and postpartum services to a year. It had been 12 weeks, and we have secured it for Indiana for 12 months. That is exciting. We were able to address, I know that Susie, we've talked, have had many conversations about how we treat those who are serving time, and we passed some legislation on women who are, or individuals who are incarcerated and pregnant, and their treatment, and making sure they're treated humanely. And so that was positive. So there are good things that we get done, and there are these handful of bills that we just spend so much time talking about when we should be talking about housing insecurity and food insecurity and child care and early childhood education. I mean, these really important, climate change, really important, significant solutions for our state. And, so much of our time is spent, distracted from those important policy pieces that we should be working on. So my answer would be, I'm surprised by how much bipartisanship there is, and I like my colleagues. I'm frustrated as heck when I see when that board lights up. I'm like, you are kidding me! How can you vote for this? But I'm sure it's returned. I mean, I think that's what's so important, is building those relationships, taking the time, and my hope is that gerrymandering doesn't create such a hurdle for bipartisanship, where you've got extreme candidates who can just do whatever they want, and it does not matter. They're going to be reelected every single time, and the last thing they need to do is actually be a team player, actually be collaborative, actually be reaching across the aisle, because then the fear of losing their seat from a further extreme candidate in a primary, that's really where I see democracy unraveling, is through gerrymandering. And to speak to what our county did, I was so proud that we had that bipartisan independent commission drawing the lines in our county, and to know that we fought for that at the state level and we did not do it. Democrat, Republican alike, we've both had the option and the opportunity to do that, and both parties have not done that. And so I was very much happy and renewed to continue the fight to make sure that happens when our county did it, and to see that it is possible and it's necessary.
Yes, thanks for coming in. I've got two questions. One relates to this last discussion and also what Jeff was saying. Admittedly, fear, and maybe I would put some other biases behind fear when I would describe it in our some of our legislators, but there's a theory that state legislatures are seeing these ugly bills come up because of the way the right-wing politicians use media, the way it works now, to feed their core, maintain their position to be reelected, with not really too much concern about getting the bill passed or being vetoed. So you end up wasting time for them to bandstand. Do you think that's going on?
Definitely. I mean, you know, it's amazing. You know, some of the bills that we heard, I'm like, oh my goodness, just because, you know, they're the supermajority and they'll hear these bills. And I know really good bills were filed in my caucus, and 0 minutes spent on just hearing a bill, just hearing an idea. But I would say, you know, maybe 97, that's probably even low, 99% of everything we heard were all Republican bills. 1% we heard were bills that came out of the Democratic caucus, whether on the House side or the Senate side. So a lot of it is, I mean, even that 167, I mean, I asked, you know, the author of that bill, what is motivating you to file this? And, you know, he said, I'm really passionate about this. This has been a commitment of mine. But what I don't understand is, then how is the language the exact same language that's been filed in every other state? I mean, that's pretty amazing to me that the same language is showing up in all these other states, and yet somehow, you know, this was an idea you had. I know that cannot be true. So that's, you know, there are these, you know, think tanks and PACs that are pushing this legislation, and they're biting and filing it, and it's getting airtime, too much, if you ask me. But it's not in response to what Indiana is asking. It's a response to what the national conversation. And I will say what I was most proud of is what I filed this year was conversations I had with constituents, things I heard from you, from different stakeholders here in our community, and those were the bills I filed. Some of them were small, because I know that this is, you know, a little ant, you know, trying to do big work. But as I said, I mean, one of the recovery community came to me and said, why do we still call the Indiana Commission to Combat Drug Abuse? Why do we call it that? And we don't even use that language anymore. And so I was able to get it changed, and it actually had to be an act of the Senate. We had to change it through a bill to change the name to substance use disorder, to address substance use disorder. So it's small, and I just know that my conversations with you directly impact how I respond to legislation and what I file that year. So if you have things, send them my way, things that are important to you.
The second one relates to your emphasis or recommendation to have citizens show up and help stop or get a law passed, and then your recommendation to, about finding a group that connects with what you are worried about or what you want to see changed. There is a group that was launched here in Bloomington and now has grown to other communities that I think we all in our churches need to look at carefully, and that's Hoosier Action. Do you think they're going to be effective in helping good legislation in the future?
Well, I hear them, I see them, they're active, they are a presence, they're statewide now, and that, you know, just started after 2016. I mean, that is remarkable that Hoosier Action Coalition can have such a standing in our state, and it's, you know, after, what are we, 6 years? That's pretty exciting. And they had a loud presence, a strong presence, very active. They were working with all their legislators and having some wins. I mean, yes, like everyone else, they didn't get everything across the finish line in a way that they felt good about. I mean, we had that, the bill that really undermines different ways that nonprofits help with bail for individuals who cannot afford it, who are serving time in jails, and this bill sort of took away that power for some of the nonprofits in Indiana and faith communities who help with this. And that was one of their big initiatives. It didn't go as quickly maybe as what the supermajority had hoped. I think Hoosier Action slowed it down and made people aware, and it took longer to get that language, and they actually had to stick it in something else, which says they were effective. This is what I would tell, if you're not participating in the League of Women Voters, you can sign up to attend. Those are virtual legislative updates every month while we're in session. So you can go to the Monroe County League of Women Voters. They do it with Brown County. And this Saturday is our last one. So you could attend that, but it's virtual. It's 9:30 to 11:30 maybe it's 9:30 to 11. But that is the legislators who serve this community. We participate, and we just field questions from those who are attending. Sorry, I digress, but I thought about that. I thought that would be a good way for all of us to stay involved. And I think they do. I told teachers, I know you feel discouraged, but it is working. It is working. They're intimidated by you. You are a force. Hoosier Action? You are a force. It does work. And it's easy to feel discouraged. It's easy to feel like your efforts are not making a difference, but they are. Maybe not in every way, but in the little ways, it matters. So stick with it.
A lot of the folks here know this about me, but I was a teacher in my first life, a public school teacher, and then I was at the Indiana Department of Education for 7 years. It was not a political position. But there were a lot of things that I learned about the politics of it because of my role. And so this is part confessional and part of what you learn when you're living in the lab. And part of that is what you said is so true, that when there is a committee and people can come and speak, I remember one of the times that I was the representative from the Department of Education to speak for the committee. You're with the same people who usually come all the time. It's the representative from the School Board Association. It's the representative from, all the ISTA and from all of the other groups. I mean, partially, the committees are tired of hearing the same people, and you have other people there who are bringing other perspectives. It really matters, because you are representing an organization. Now, our legislative liaison would always remind me, now remember, you are representing the Indiana Department of Education, and I would say, I am representing what is in the best interest of children, and then I would go. And, but part of that is other voices really matter, because if you're hearing a lot of the same voices all the time, somebody's gonna bring a different perspective. And the other thing I learned, this is like 25 years ago, but the other thing that I learned is that just because somebody is on a committee doesn't mean that they are an expert in it. And so you may be coming from a perspective of knowing as a professional. That doesn't mean that the senators or the representatives on the committees, that this is something that they know as well. And so even if they are voting against something, sometimes it's just because they don't know, or they haven't heard another way that they understand it better. So one example was in Indiana, we had the latest kindergarten entrance age in the country. And kindergarten's not even mandatory in Indiana, but even to be able to go to kindergarten, we had the oldest age of children. At the same time that we were learning from 0 to 5 are the most important years in terms of brain development and all of those sorts of things. And so I was in front of the committee, and it was this was a Senate committee and education committee. And one of the senators asked me and said, but if children are older, won't they come to school knowing more? Won't they have learned more? And first I was, how am I going to respond to that? And some of it is that, but also, if you are not in this world in which you are understanding what early childhood development means and developmentally appropriate practice and what happens in 0 to 5, there may be some logic to that. So by the time they come to school, if they know all this, then they're going to be able to do that. And so, some of it is also being patient, and trying to understand what's underneath it. But even what will be another angle for somebody to understand it in a new way? And so it was a couple years later, I was on, Governor O'Bannon had an early childhood task force, and I was on that. And as part of that, I went to one of the Governors Association, their national meeting. And I watched some of these same folks, because it's not just the Governors Association folks who come, but other ones. And at that point, a lot of the science around it was coming out. And there was a room of, politicians, mostly governors, but also other legislatures in the room. And there was a neuroscientist there who had pictures of brains. And this is what's happening to young children. This is how these kind of things are important. And it was like an aha moment. We could have been using the same language over and over, but this was another way for somebody to see something. And so I just think it's really important that there's a lot of diverse voices, because we don't hear things the same way. We don't come from the same experiences. If we're marinating in the field we know, we may not always remember that it's new for some other people. And, and that's outside of the divisiveness, that's just, that, so I'm just interested in your response.
I think that is a important insight. It is the perspective of different stakeholders. Unfortunately, even when you hear from the Association of Pediatric Medicine that comes out against that anti-trans girls sports bill, even when you've got bodies of individuals or special interest groups or medical associations coming out support or opposing something, it's a different perspective. But some of these initiatives are driven by something that you can't quite understand where it's coming from. But you are right. When you are sitting there and you're hearing maybe a lot of the same perspective, and then somebody is there and it's a mother, that sort of puts you back on your heels. Somebody firsthand experience who's willing to come in before the Senate, the Senate or the House, and share their experience to a committee. That is powerful. And your experts, those are really important moments. That's why this faith community question is really important. When you hear from a faith community, it's substantial and something that maybe is a bit of a surprise on a piece of legislation. So yes, it is so important. I only say I can't promise that science is going to change anything, but hopefully maybe just a couple votes. And sometimes it's all that counts. Those just a couple votes makes a big difference. Susie.
Since you said, and I had read this someplace, that yes, there was a limit on the number of emails you received, do you recommend to back it up with a handwritten letter or a telephone call or whatever? Because that's a huge risk to run, that you think you've expressed yourself and maybe it never got there.
Right. And so even if it's just a personal email, if you don't have time to send an actual hard letter, that's okay. A personal email, there are not limits to those. Those all are sent to the appropriate mailbox. It's the ones that are generated by a special interest group that will, they have put a limit on it. And I don't even know, because how would we know, but it was 11:34 where so many people in Indiana stood up and said no. And there were an incredible amount of emails that it made us, it came to the attention of the ISTA, because some of these did not get through. And so it was something, I know the minority, I didn't even know was a thing to tell my constituents, if you can, send a personal email, because there are these, arbitrary limits on what gets sent to legislators. So if you can take the time, it's worth it.
So it's not the personal emails, it's the copied ones that
Yes, that get
organizations-
generated by something, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Just one more question. I appreciate your time, and we want to remember your family as well, right? So you just dropped a little breadcrumb that's concerning, however, what Forrest had said in his email about violent crime. Anecdotally, it seems to me like it's up. I don't have hard data on that. But is there any place that you know of, locally or in the state, where there are many causes to this, right, where good constructive work is being done on this issue?
I just want to speak to, I don't really know the circumstances behind that comment. And I don't even know if it was violent. I just know that that was part of what Forrest was saying, an increase. And where that was coming from, I don't know. But to answer your question, I mean, there's just so much a person can take. And we have a lot of problems, serious problems going on in our world. When we're talking about the instances of mental health struggles among our young people, and access to basic care, substance use disorder, housing instability, income inequality, the climate crisis, these are manifesting themselves in people sort of being pushed to the brink. And I have no data, but I anticipate that some of this is a direct it's directly related to increases in violent crimes. And all the more, we're coming out of a 2-year period where we physically were distant from one another, and social media has become so adversarial, just like this, a place where people can, I guess, suspend any kind of grace and mercy to one another and just really let it all hang out. To speak to why people would go into public service. But it doesn't even stop there. I mean, it is, if we could all find it within us to be more graceful, be more merciful in how we interact with one another, and do a better job in the legislature of responding to substance use disorder, of responding to mental health issues, of making sure we're tending to the needs of Hoosiers and not using all of our time on really extreme, ugly, necessary, discriminatory bills, but get to the business that's going to truly help Hoosiers. I think that would be where I would like to spend our time, and I would hope would have an impact in the violent crimes that we're seeing, or the increases throughout the state.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all folks for coming, and you all for joining us, and we do thank you for being here with us and for your service.
Come see me there. Come see me.
There you go.
If you come, I mean, I have a little cubicle, but we can sit and talk, and if there are a number of you, I can reserve a room. If you want to take a legislative day of action for St. Mark's, make that happen, and come and sit in the gallery, or come and listen to a committee. But maybe that's one of your classes. Like, let's find some issues and then follow things through to the very end. Next session is a long session. We will be setting the budget for the next 2 years. And to respond to some of these needs, highlight where do you want Indiana to really focus on our resources, and then apply the pressure. Find ways of working with me, working with Representative Matt Pierce, to file legislation that reflects, to make requests for our budget that reflect your values. It would be, that's what I'm here for. That's what I want to do.
Thank you. Blessings on your work. And you can also let folks know, of course, that this will be in the archive recorded section of the website, and they can watch this as well. Go home, everybody. Have a good night. Peace to you. Bye.